I met a gypsy.
And then all of a sudden the government says you can only clear half of it. You've just lost the value of that land.
And they've got to compensate.
They've got to compensate
by law.
Which you're looking at hundreds of billions of dollars.
Yeah.
So what John Howard's government did was they went to Queensland's Premier, who was a National Party Premier, Rob Borbidge, and said, let's do a deal. You enact tree clearing legislation preventing the clearing of trees.
So this is exactly what's happening right now.
Exactly.
This is exactly the same shit.
So Borbidge signed a memorandum. The Liberal and Labor Party people in Borbidge's coalition document.
So they've circumvented
and that's
the
immoral.
Constitution.
It's unethical.
Well, it's fraudulent.
Of course it is. So then what happened was the Howard government in 1998, Beattie came to power. The Howard government paid hundreds of millions of dollars in taxpayer payments and said, here, Peter Beattie, go for your life. Use it. No conditions attached, providing you put in place native vegetation protection laws. Notice how they called it a sweet term? Native vegetation protection. Doing the right thing. Bullshit. These farmers were stolen. Their land rights were stolen. And so what happened was the federal government pushed that. We've got it in writing in a letter from Peter Beattie to John Howard's government saying, we will do this so that you can comply with the UN's Kyoto Protocol. That is a federal government order that the states enacted, and the farmers have been stolen for hundreds of billions of dollars. They're doing exactly the same thing here. Morrison said he would not mandate vaccines.
Hey, listen, I've literally got it right here for you. I've got it right. So exactly what you have just said. So this is where now I've jumped off they're just fucking incompetent people. There's no agenda. They're just people that are doing a shit job. And by making more laws and taking freedoms, it just makes it easy to govern. This is now where I've got one foot off the train. This is where I'm like looking to kind of bail, right? Is I heard this interview. So with everything that what you just gave in that example with John Howard is exactly what is happening here. The federal government cannot mandate something, so they are giving the power. Well, the states already have the power.
No, they're not giving them the power.
The states already have the power, and they're going, hey, even though this is unconstitutional, even though this is essentially fraudulent against the Australian Constitution, we're not going to stop you from doing it.
Well, they're asking them to.
Yeah. So this is not conspiracy shit.
Oh, hang on. This just a couple of weeks ago?
Yeah.
Before, you need to know that a month before that, Morrison, our Prime Minister, said he will not mandate vaccines.
Oh, of course he can't.
Okay?
He won't because
then a month later, he says this.
Yeah. So this is everything that we need to hear about what's happening with the government right now.
That want to jab would have their second dose. And once they are able to have that opportunity, would you support measures such as vaccine certificates to make sure that people could go to events at full capacity next year?
Well, these are all the things that we'll consider in those various step changes, step 2, step 3. We already have vaccine certificates. They already exist. And those vaccine certificates this month we expect to be in a form that can be dropped into Apple wallets, things
crazy.
of that nature.
Yeah.
And later in the year,
it's immoral.
About October, we estimate, we'll have a vaccination certificate that will be able to be used, internationally recognised.
It's just on no jab. You said we don't mandate vaccines in this country. But you, I believe, were Social Services Minister when no jab, no play came in, which is about as close as you can get to mandating vaccines. So why wouldn't you take that approach? Just to follow up this question.
Well, I didn't say we wouldn't. I'd say
why not take up the French approach, where we've got a tiny minority protesting and millions of extra people now getting vaccines?
Yeah. My record, as you've outlined it, is true. So I think
so
you know where I think my record speaks to my disposition on these things, but they're not things that the Prime Minister or even the federal government decides. Ultimately, restrictions that are be placed on people moving about in their states can only be imposed by states. The Commonwealth government can't do that. Only the state governments
completely
can place
immoral
restrictions on people entering a venue,
completely
entering
immoral.
a place of work, things like this. There are also industrial relations issues.
Complete violation of natural law.
They can apply the public health orders that mandate vaccinations, like the Western Australia Premier has done in terms of quarantine-based workers. They have those powers. They can implement them. I can provide them with the tools that helps them to implement them.
I can provide them with the tools that help them.
Digital vaccine certificates and things of that nature, and they can employ them. That's why we've kept them well up to date with how those those mechanisms and those systems are working.
Recently, and Andrew, I mentioned earlier.
All right, so yeah, that was the shit that made me really kind of worry about where we're at. So essentially, the federal government knows that it cannot legally mandate vaccines.
Quite clear.
Very, very clear. But the states do have the power to do that. If the federal government, as you said, decided to pass a law, the states would have to comply with that law. But essentially, this is a bureaucratic way of legally circumventing the Australian Constitution.
Nothing more needs to be said.
No, that's it.
You've said it.
Yeah, it's fucking insane.
It's inhuman. It's anti-human.
And then you take away the right to protest, and we're fucked.
And even if you do protest, and some people have protested, if you do protest, you're not reported as protesting, so nobody knows that you've been in a protest. We've had thousands of people protesting, but the media doesn't report it. Or if they do, they'll show a small side group, and they'll say, look at these dickheads.
300 people turned
Look at
out
these
to this,
dickheads,
yeah.
you know? And then what...
Just show you the dude riding the horse.
Yeah, and so what happens, you know, we have got small bodies. I mean, I'm only tiny, but, you know, you're bigger. But your body is still tiny compared to a tiger. I mean, you would not stand up to a tiger. And humans have got this neocortex again, but we've also got a very good social skill. And so we've
got the most effective communication.
Yes, and so we can band together and we can knock off a saber-toothed tiger. We can defend our property. We can defend our families against saber-toothed tigers because of our social skills and our logical, rational thinking skills. So what's happened over the years is that if you rock the boat, then you're a threat to that community. So you're ostracized from the community. The people who did that, their genes dropped off. And so the genes of what do you call it, belonging.
Complicit.
It's a valid thing. The genes that encourage us to be sociable and to belong.
Yeah.
Perpetuated. Now, you still get some individuals who don't. Okay, I get that. But the point I'm getting to is that the need to belong in humans is extremely strong.
Yes.
It's a matter of life and death, literally.
Tribalism.
Correct. But so that need to belong is so strong that quite often what happens is people are thinking, shit, I don't believe this. So I better speak up. Oh, no one will like me. I'll shut up. There's a famous, he's the best in the world, they say, Richard LeBlanc Smith. He's an expert on corporate governance, right? In, 20 years ago, HIH fell over on Enron and a few other companies. Bad failures of corporate governance. Fraud, theft, you name it. Disgraceful. And so all the governments around the world piled in and said, we'll write legislation that this won't happen, you know, that put in place procedures and boards. Richard LeBlanc Smith said, this is bullshit. Because what happens in boards is that the strongest personality prevails. And so a CEO, if he's got a strong or she's got a strong personality, you might have 7 or 8 other board members. He or she will say, we need to do this and it's going to cost us $2 billion or whatever. And everyone goes, doesn't make sense to me. But
he's the dude.
Can I ask a question? What the hell are you doing asking a question? Everyone should know that answer. What are you doing as a board? Okay, I won't ask that question. You know what I mean? So they're afraid of admitting their fundamental lack of knowledge. That weakness, that gutlessness in people is what enables characters to hijack companies, hijack unions, hijack
countries,
football clubs, hijack parliaments, hijack countries. And then what happens is over the years, you suck in the power from the states. Remember, we had very few...
Decentralization.
You centralize.
Yeah.
Now, when you centralize, then what happens is you get people from overseas, vested interests, driving the policy of your country through
because
bureaucrats.
There's such a small people that have the ability now to be bought. If you enjoyed this content, please like and subscribe. And to listen to the full 3-hour podcast, search Gypsy Tales in your favorite podcast platform or click the link in the description below. Gypsy Gang.